There is no peace for a child of Bhaal. You've learned this lesson time and again, as all who are close to you suffer because of your tainted blood. When John Irenicus fell, you had hoped for some sort of respite, but peril follows you like pestilence. The time of the prophecy has come. 5 powerful Bhaalspawn have arisen, leading their armies across the Sword Coast, slaughtering their weaker siblings and innocents alike in a wave of massive destruction. Like wildfire, panic spreads before the armies of the 5, and those suspected of being children of Bhaal are cast out and revived. Even in Soldanesalar, unease grows into fear at your presence. Queen Elysim urges you to visit a sacred grove where the ancients might shed light on your fate. You wonder what part you will play in the dreaded prophecy, and how long before its culmination devours your soul. Only one thing seems certain. So long as Bhaal's throne of blood stands empty, chaos shall reign.
What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you our final part in our Story of Baldur's Gate 2 series, and with the last part we actually wrapped up the base game. So this part is all about covering, as you saw in the intro there, the Throne of Bhaal expansion. Now, this expansion aimed to wrap up the story of the Bhaalspawn, and it begins by hearing about other Bhaalspawn taking waves of armies and things and just ravaging the countryside, so to speak. And we, as far as we know, were still in the elven city that we left until we are urged by the Queen of the Elves to attend a sacred grove of sorts, where the ancients might speak to us about what's to come. And that's where Throne of Bhaal actually picks up gameplay-wise. All we have to do to initiate this part is simply talk to one of the many stoneheads laying around us. Any of them will do, and that will start the dialogue that carries us forward. Now, they will give you this prophecy here, and this is ultimately just foreshadowing about events to come in this DLC. Now, immediately after this, we are attacked by another Bhaalspawn. She was sent here specifically to murder us, and she reveals that she herself is also a Bhaalspawn. Obviously, we have to defend ourselves and kill this woman. If we kill her, her friends that are with her will run off, but upon her death, we will find ourselves transported to a pocket plane. Now, this gets explained very promptly by a Solar who is there to shepherd us through this, if you will. If you're unaware, Solars are like celestial entities in D&D. Now, the Solar goes on to explain that basically it's time for this Bhaalspawn saga to get itself sorted out. More specifically, she will also explain that we are technically in the Throne of Blood, which is our father, Bhaal's plane of the abyss. Now, we, because of our divine essence that is from Bhaal himself, have been granted a certain amount of power over this realm, whether we realize or intend to use it or not. Thus, the creation of this pocket plane that we find ourselves in. The Solar will tell us that basically we're not ready to do what we need to do, and it's her responsibility that she was assigned to by the gods to get you ready. Right after she departs, we are then greeted by the spirit of Sarevok, from all the way back at the very first game. Sarevok, while mocking us as one does, he will explain that we are actually in our father's abyssal realm, that it's not just like a separate plane of hell or something, we are literally in that realm. The essence of your blood made a sort of cocoon, this pocket plane. Sarevok thinks that you did this to protect yourself from the power of the plane, lest it rip you apart because you're not ready for it. Sarevok himself is in fact dead, this is just his spirit here. Because when the Bhaalspawn die, they all are sent to their father's realm. He saw this cocoon forming and came to check it out in his spirit form and found you. He goes on to explain that if you give him the tiniest bit of your soul, or any divine soul really, that he would be able to restore his flesh. He would not, however, regain his Bhaalspawn power, if you want to call it that, as his initial death drained him of the taint of his blood, which is what is considered the Bhaalspawn essence. So all that is gone, but if you give him the tiniest fraction of your soul, he could be brought back to life. If Imoen is with you, that is to say that you finished the base game and then carried her forward into Throne of Bhaal, she can be convinced to give part of her soul to resurrect Sarevok as well. If we choose to help him out, he will go on to explain a few things. For starters, that this pocket plane exists because we need it to exist, as we kind of figured out earlier. But that said, there are basically challenges in here that will unlock as the expansion progresses, and this is going to challenge us to know ourselves, so to speak, or our lingering doubts about what's to come, that kind of stuff. And in facing those challenges as they crop up, we will kind of be getting ready to face the Throne of Blood. So basically, this pocket plane is going to be full of challenges that we need to clear as they become available to us, which we'll talk more about later. Now, before we carry on with our challenge, we can actually choose to take Sarevok with us as a companion. Moreover, he goes on to explain that he'll even swear an oath to you, which here in this place would be the equivalent of a geas, actually. He would be forced to comply with it. And then you can take him along as a companion throughout the DLC, which I highly recommend you do. There is actually no downside to doing so. You can just hang out with your half-brother, I guess. In addition to the challenges and things to come, there are a couple more things I want to mention here. For starters, the statues near the kind of door to the north can be clicked on, and through those you can actually swap out companions from the base game. So if you had a specific party you were using or anything, or you want to mix it up, you can still do that. In addition, there is an imp butler running around named Kespinar or something like that. Now, what he will do for you is throughout the DLC, you will find unique items and things that are basically components that the imp here can use in combination with paying him, of course, to make you some very strong, unique items. Now, the other thing I want to mention is that Sarevok will also explain where we need to go next, which is the Tethiran city of Saradush. However, before we can leave the pocket plane, we have to take care of the first challenge that we are given. Now, this challenge sees us interacting with a Bhaalspawn who basically turned into a murderer and was ultimately killed for the murders he committed, which he calls retribution. And then you have to fight waves of enemies. And this Bhaalspawn will basically explain that the more you just live your life as a Bhaalspawn, the more death you spread simply by existing. Thus, the more people want to exact retribution on you. But once that's done, we will be granted the ability to leave, which we just click on the door north of it, and then we are deposited into the city I just mentioned earlier. When we arrive, we will find the city under siege. We will also see a woman named Melisande arguing with civilians as well as troops near the citadel of sorts, if you want to call it that, in the city here. Now, ultimately, the forces that are guarding the door will try to attack the peasants trying to get in, and you'll be forced to step in because they saw you and thought you were invaders of some sort as you teleported into a city that is otherwise blocked off by the siege happening outside. So you'll get attacked, be forced to defend yourself, and then you'll have a conversation with Melisande. Melisande will explain quite a few things, that the city is under siege by a man named Yaga-Shura, and moreover that he is after all of the Bhaalspawn that are housed here. Basically, there's several other Bhaalspawn in this city, and that is why it is under siege. The person in control of the forces here, a man named Gromnir, is also a Bhaalspawn and was a general before being brought to this city by Melisande. Gromnir has gone a bit mad, it would seem, and has blocked the castle off in the face of the siege. So Melisande tasked us, if we will, because there's not really any other way to escape, trying to get into the castle to deal with Gromnir. Now at this point we are set loose in the city, where we basically just need to find a way into the citadel to face Gromnir head on. So there are technically two ways to do this, but the easiest way is by far to go to the temple, talk to the priestess there, just be nice about it when you ask her if she knows any way into the palace, and she will then give you a key to the jail very close by to where the temple is. Upon getting this key, whether you just killed her for it or not, you can then head into the jail and then make your way through the small maze, if you will, where you'll fight a bunch of vampires that have taken up residence in this abandoned building. And once you find yourself on the other side, you'll essentially be in the palace's basement. Now, you'll be attacked by a bunch more of Gromnir's forces here, until ultimately you're able to make your way into the actual castle, palace, citadel, whatever you want to call it, where you'll find yourself fighting through even more of Gromnir's troops until you make it up to his little throne room. Here you'll see Gromnir and Melisande arguing. Gromnir is aware of your presence, that you arrived in the city. He thinks you're here to assassinate him, and refuses to believe anything Melisande says. So he has her carted off as you walk into the room, and then a fight ensues immediately because he attacks you, and you're forced to kill Gromnir. This is where Melisande re-enters the room, and explains that with Gromnir dead, and there still not being any way out of the city, you will be forced to deal with Yaga-Shura somehow, as Yaga-Shura is actually a Bhaalspawn as well, and the general of the assaulting army. Melisande will go on to give us more details about Yaga-Shura, as she is apparently familiar with all the Bhaalspawn, as she has been trying to protect the world from the prophecy, according to herself. She'll tell us that Yaga-Shura is a fire giant, but moreover, he seems to be basically immune to all harm for some reason. She's not entirely sure why this is, but she knows he wasn't born this way, that this is something that has been learned or taught or placed upon him in some manner. Melisande is also aware of where Yaga-Shura actually spent his childhood, which is the Forest of Myrrh, and she will go on to explain that traveling there might reveal some sort of information or give us some hint as to what could possibly break Yaga-Shura's seemingly invincibility. Now, at this point, what we need to do is use our acquired pocket plane ability, which will then transport us back to the pocket plane, and then from the pocket plane, we can exit out into basically just outside of the city of Saradush. And then at this point, you will be teleported to the nearby Forest of Myrrh. Now, you're going to fight a bunch of Yaga-Shura's troops here, but eventually you'll make your way across the map, which is necessary to reach the exit point. And then at that point, you can fast travel to a place called the Temple. At the Temple, we'll actually be confronted by a wraith pretending to be Gorion, who accuses you of all sorts of stuff, but ultimately you'll be able to kill him. As we move forward into the actual temple proper, we'll be confronted by a skeleton cleric that initially thinks we're Bhaal. However, he realized then that we only are a vessel for Bhaal's power, and then everything in the temple tries to kill us as well, and we have to fight our way through that. Once we head up the stairs, however, we'll run into a witch named Nialee. Nialee will actually explain quite a few things that are going on here. For starters, Nialee herself used to be a priestess of Bhaal. Moreover, that she raised Yaga-Shura. She actually stole him from his mother and then brought him here to this temple to be raised. Moreover, Nialee taught her son, if you want to call him that, how to remove his heart and keep it magically safe, which makes him effectively immune to all harm. In order to fix this, Nialee wants you to go to Yaga-Shura's mountain stronghold and gather Yaga-Shura's heart as well as her own heart, because Yaga-Shura stole her heart as well, and she feels betrayed and would like to repay the favor, so to speak. So with this, we can find ourselves fast traveling to the Marching Mountains just north of us, and this is where the lair of Yaga-Shura is. So we're going to fight through a ton of fire giants here. They are everywhere, and then there's actually a bit of a puzzle for us to solve. We'll come across this kind of contraption right in front of a huge set of stairs. The stairs are unpassable because this contraption is preventing passage through some sort of magical field, and we are forced to gather 4 runes from around the fire temple, I guess, for lack of a better word here. And those runes, once acquired, will then shut off the device. So you have to solve just kind of a bit of a walking around puzzle and gathering these runes to then use on this device, which then dispels the barrier on the stairs that then allows us to carry forward. Now, once we are in the inner part of the temple, we'll have to fight even more servants of Yaga-Shura here, which are mostly fire giants. And at this point, we'll be able to find the heart of Yaga-Shura in a brazier, and if we continue one more room past that, we can find the bedroom of Yaga-Shura, and under his bed we will find Nialee's heart, because remember, we have to bring both of them back. Now at this point we can head back to Nialee in the temple at the Forest of Myrrh, and upon giving her both hearts, she will extinguish Yaga-Shura's heart, which will then make him not immune to harm anymore. But Nialee, upon reobtaining her own heart, will suddenly have a change of heart and try to kill us for trying to kill her son. So we are then forced to fight Nialee and the dryads she summons. At this point we can head to the siege camp nearby.
As you arrive in the clearing, the first thing that draws your attention is the plume of smoke billowing from nearby Saradush. Its walls have been breached in several places, and its utter devastation shows a city that has been completely sacked by invaders. Bodies of soldiers are everywhere, as is the stench of death. The screams of the innocent attempting to flee can still be heard. Yaga-Shura and his army are nowhere in your immediate sight.
Which is just outside the besieged city, and this is where we can finally confront Yaga-Shura. Upon realizing that he can be physically harmed, he will run off and we will be forced to deal with all of his lackeys around the place before he finally comes back for us to defeat him properly. Now, once Yaga-Shura lies dead, we will be immediately transported back to the pocket plane where the Solar is waiting to speak to us. The Solar will show us visions of our origin. We will get to talk to the spirits of Gorion as well as our mother about how she was a priestess of Bhaal, and then how Gorion rescued you, as well as quite a few other spawn of Bhaal, actually, that were going to be ritually sacrificed to bring back the Lord of Murder. You were spared this, as well as Saravok, presumably Imoen, as well as probably a few others, but that said, Bhaalspawn still did in fact die at this ritual site before all of them were able to escape or be saved. So once this is done, we will come back to, so to speak, in the real world, where we will be having a conversation with Melisande, who will have shown up. She will explain that the city has fallen, all the Bhaalspawn in there were murdered by Yaga-Shura before we could remove his protections and kill him, so all the Bhaalspawn that were in that city are dead now. And Melisande will give us some information about Yaga-Shura's allies, the other children of Bhaal, and supposedly some of the most powerful of them. Now, one of these was Elisera, which is the woman who attacked us in the grove at the very beginning of this video, and two others are Abazigal and Sendai. Melisande says she can point you to where these two people have power at, their enclaves or their fortress, whatever you want to call it, and that in order to attack them, you need to head south to a village in the Callum Desert known as Amkethrin. On our way to Amkethrin, we will be stopped by local forces for the Kingdom of Tethir. They will attack us simply for being Bhaalspawn. We'll have to defend ourselves, and then we'll be able to carry on to the city of Amkethrin.
Dust blows around you, clearing a moment later to reveal what can only be Amkethrin, a village nestled into an outcropping of rock amidst a desert so dry and sparse of life that you wonder how such a place could survive. Dominating the village, and seemingly carved out of the stone face of the rocks themselves, is a large and ornate fortress, its purpose unknown.
Here, once we find the monk order that is just to the north of us, we will be able to meet with a man named Balthazar. This is the man Melisande actually instructed us to speak with once we had arrived. So Melisande herself is not here, however she gave Balthazar instructions to basically point out where the enclaves of the two Bhaalspawn we are tracking down actually are. So this is where we can just start tracking them down. There are a few side quests here and there, kind of just general distractions around town if you want to partake in that kind of thing. However, when we're ready, we need to find either Abazigal's lair or Sendai's enclave. We will have to do both, it just doesn't actually matter which order we do them in. Abazigal, once you arrive at his lair here, you will be confronted by someone called Draconis. Draconis will quickly inform us that he is the son of Abazigal, and he will pretty much attack you no matter what you do. And this will ultimately culminate in him turning into a dragon, because it would appear that this Bhaalspawn is in fact actually half dragon. So then we can pick up Draconis' head into the actual dungeon here, and this is where we can start navigating the dungeon. I want to say this dungeon is the worst. I actually hate this dungeon. You'll get attacked by an initial group of enemies. They're going to drop an empty breath potion flask and a stone to flesh scroll. There are also 4 pools of water around you. Basically, you need to slowly go through each one of these pools. You can only go through one of them right at the beginning, which is the one on the left. This path will lead you to a sort of home in a weird way. It's like the interior of a house almost, with a pool in it. That pool, combined with the empty breath potion flask, will give us a breath potion that will then allow us to traverse some of the other pools, well, specifically one of them, on the right, which will then lead us to a trapped monk. This monk will give us a rope, which combined with the breath potion flask will allow us to take the other 2 pools, one of which leads to a madman named Lycanth, who is in possession of a scroll of reversal that we need to undo the magic guarding Abazigal's lair. Also, you can save a green dragon that is being forced under a geas to protect Abazigal's lair. However, you can kill the dragon, but regardless, you will still need the scroll no matter what you do here. You cannot just kill the dragon and continue. You do actually have to get this scroll to pass the magic ward. And if you have the scroll, you can avoid the fight with the dragon, so it makes sense to just avoid that fight. But once all that's done, we can finally confront Abazigal in his lair. So I do want to mention, in order to get the scroll of reversal from Lycanth, he basically needs the eye stalk of a beholder, and if you have the stone to flesh scroll, you can actually use it on some adventurers who had been turned to stone in the caves here. And this is just kind of like a funny little Easter egg about them being like a party of adventurers, like an actual D&D like group. And when you're fighting them, well, when they attack you, once you meet with them again, after you've sent them on a quest to go get your eye stalk, they will actually attack you, and when that inevitably fails through a scripted event, you don't even get to fight them, and then it shows them reloading, so it's kind of a funny little Easter egg I wanted to mention. But once that's done, we can bring the scroll and everything, and then we're confronting Abazigal. So Abazigal is the very much so high and mighty sorts, thinks because he's half dragon, he's better than everybody, and you're gonna have to fight him, obviously, because he needs to die. However, he's a dragon, so that fight is about as fun as it sounds, but eventually he will die. And just like with Yaga-Shura, we will be pulled into the pocket plane to speak with the Solar yet again. At this point, the Solar will have us speak with the spirit of ourselves from another time. This is interesting because our other self actually explains that while the prophecy that is all about the Bhaalspawn and everything is talking about you do in fact bring death and destruction in your wake simply by being a Bhaalspawn, but that's not what the prophecy is about. The prophecy is actually about you stopping the 5. That is to say, the 5 most powerful Bhaalspawn, excluding yourself, which are the Bhaalspawn we've been killing up to this point: Ilisera, Yaga-Shura, and Abazigal. So once this is done, we can then head off to Sendai's enclave whenever we are ready. And this one is a little different because when we arrive at the enclave, we're only going to find a lone woodcutter. Now, if we talk to this woodcutter, he'll have no idea what we're talking about as far as Bhaalspawn go, but he'll say that he's seen some strange going-ons around the forest, and when we go to check these things out, we'll be ambushed by creatures every time. If you haven't figured it out or it's not suspicious, you can attack the woodcutter, actually, to cut this part short, if you can just kind of piece together that this guy isn't who he says he is, or just keep getting ambushed in the woods until it comes out anyway. But the woodcutter, as well as all these animals, are actually drow, protecting a concealed entrance to Sendai's lair, because Sendai is a drow Bhaalspawn. Sendai's enclave is actually pretty straightforward as far as dungeons go. It's pretty much just a straight shot to her. However, it is a gauntlet of tons of enemies. She will just keep throwing all of her armies at you, basically. Drows, their slaves, her lieutenants, their priestesses, even her mind flayer allies. But on our way to Sendai, we will actually see a bit of a cutscene of sorts, where an emissary from Balthazar, which is the monk back at the city of Amkethrin, if you'll remember, is talking to Sendai, basically telling her that she's gonna die. Once we finally make it to Sendai, there is, of course, an inevitable fight, though I do want to mention, on our way to her, we can actually do some really cool things, like we can actually meet the Spectator from the Sahagan city from the base game. If we actually went there, we can even have a conversation with the Spectator about seeing them again, even if you killed them. So there is some kind of fun stuff going on there. However, eventually, you will make your way to Sendai, as I mentioned. Now, when you get there, it'll be just her, because you killed all of her lackeys, but she will have been preparing a ritual while you were making your way to her, and she will summon 7 statues on the platforms around her. These are all her, basically, but with different fighting styles, and they will activate one at a time, and as you kill them, more drow will be summoned in from the steps, so you have to fight the statues and the drows that are being summoned, so kind of have to play that fiddle back and forth, so to speak, as she summons in drow as you kill her statues. But once all the statues are dead, she herself is forced back into the room, where you chase her down and fight her. Now, upon her death, she will show us a vision of sorts, and this is a vision of Balthazar and Melisande fighting. Balthazar will claim that Melisande is no Bhaalspawn, though to be fair, we didn't really have any inkling that she would have been up to this point anyway. After this little vision, we will be forced back into the pocket plane to speak with the Solar yet again, and this is where she will force the spirit of Yaga-Shura to talk to us about what it is the 5 were planning. Yaga-Shura will explain that their plan was that the greatest of them banded together to resurrect Bhaal to serve him, actually. So all of the 5 were killing other Bhaalspawn to return their essence back to the Lord of Murder, where they were eventually hoping to resurrect him and then serve as his right hand, so to speak, and be like demigods as he took back his place of power. Moreover, Yaga-Shura will explain that the 5 and yourself are greater than the other Bhaalspawn because apparently you got more of Bhaal's essence than the rest of them, and that in killing the 5, you have actually transferred a ton of the essence of Bhaal back to the Throne of Blood, meaning that Bhaal is closer to being resurrected than he's ever been. After this, we will be sent back to the actual world, so to speak, and upon exiting Sendai's enclave, we will be greeted by Elminster, actually. So we haven't really seen him much up to this point, but we did meet him throughout the first game, if we followed along that far. And Elminster will explain that basically he's trying to keep the local governments and things to mind their own business and let this situation between the Bhaalspawn resolve itself. We can have learned from, of course, Sendai, when she showed us the imagery of Balthazar, from Yaga-Shura, who actually tells us, and then again from Elminster, that Balthazar is actually the last of the 5, which again is the monk that we greeted at the city of Amkethrin. Elminster here will actually tell us to seek out Saemon Havarian in Amkethrin, who should be able to help us with our problem of getting into the monastery, which is magically sealed. After which, Elminster will take off, and we need to travel back to Amkethrin and find Saemon Havarian in the smuggler's cave there. If you don't remember, Saemon was the captain of the ship that took us to Spellhold in the base game, and potentially has betrayed us quite a bit. That said, upon meeting Saemon in the smuggling cavern of Amkethrin, he will offer you basically to just put on guard uniforms, and then he knows all the passwords and stuff to get into the monastery, and if you just follow him, it's a real easy way. If you choose to kill Saemon, there is another way through an undead cave. However, I would just recommend that you follow Saemon Havarian on this one, even if he has betrayed you many times, because he will do just that. He will give you uniforms, let you walk into the monastery with him, and then you'll be greeted by Balthazar's monks. Apparently, Saemon had a deal with these monks that he was going to drug you or something to basically make you incapable of fighting back. However, because of all the stuff going on, Saemon has actually chosen not to do that, of course, so we are free to fight our way into the monastery against what Saemon Havarian was originally intended to do. So we actually had our back on this one. Now, upon entering the monastery, we can have a conversation with Balthazar. He is in fact a Bhaalspawn. However, his motives might not be what you think they are. Balthazar is very much so a righteous person. Even being one of the greatest Bhaalspawn, he was actually dedicating himself to preventing the Lord of Murder's return. So he joined the 5 as a way to kill all of the other Bhaalspawn, and then when he was sure he was going to be the last one, he was planning on committing a ritual suicide. But before he dies, he will go on to tell us that he was recruited to be in the 5 by none other than Melisande, the seemingly sweet, nice, helpful person we've met throughout this DLC. But upon Balthazar's death, we will be once again transported to the pocket plane to speak to the Solar. Now the Solar at this point will actually force Melisande to talk to you, basically, and explain exactly what's happening. So Melisande has actually been the antagonist the entire time. However, she is not a Bhaalspawn. Melisande was actually the highest of high priestesses for Bhaal while he was actually alive. Melisande explains that in order for Bhaal's plan to work with all of these children that he made and then being sacrificed to return his essence to the Throne of Blood, in order for this to be successful, Melisande would have had to perform certain rites that would have actually enabled him to return. However, she never did this. She's actually just been guarding that essence basically by herself up to this point, which has given her tremendous power, because all of the essence that should have been going back to the Throne of Blood was actually being hoarded by Melisande per orders of Bhaal, actually. However, she betrayed Bhaal and decided to try to raise herself to godhood despite not actually even being Bhaalspawn. So she created the 5 and tried to get all the Bhaalspawn to kill each other. She shepherded all the Bhaalspawn to Saradush, where then the 5 could go and kill all of them. And her actual name is Melisande the Black-Hearted. Now, she will go on to explain that with all of the 5 dead and you basically being the only Bhaalspawn left, besides, say, Imoen, that she plans on ascending to godhood, and she's going to the Throne of Blood to absorb all the essence to raise herself to divinity. What you'll have to do is confront the rest of the challenges in the pocket plane that I have not mentioned up to this point, but every time you've killed one of these Bhaalspawn up to this point in the story, it will have unlocked another challenge in the pocket plane for you to complete. At this point, in order to confront a Melisson, you have to complete all of the challenges in the pocket plane, which will then allow you to basically dissolve the cocoon that is this pocket plane and allow you to enter the Throne of Blood fully and prepared for what's to come. Now, these challenges are mostly just fighting stuff, but they can be a little interesting. For instance, you can come across an aspect of your doubt, which is trying to convince you that doubt is important even for an immortal, because this is the only way that you would actually know, say, where to stop reaching for power as a god. You can choose to accept that or not, and then you'll have to fight it. You can actually speak to the god Cyric in one of these challenges. Cyric is, of course, the god that actually killed Bhaal during the time of troubles. Now, this is a ton of crazy lore stuff that the Cyric conversation actually tells you. He even mentions Ao, the Overfather or the Overgod, which, if you're unaware, is really cool because Ao is actually he's the Overgod. He's the one that sets the rules all of the other gods have to follow, and is largely responsible for the rules and guidelines and portfolios of all the other gods. Very cool stuff, little beyond the scope of this video, just wanted to mention that it gets mentioned here. And then the last challenge is actually to fight the Ravager. So the Slayer, which is the avatar we've turned into previously throughout this series actually, is but one manifestation of Bhaal's power. The purest form, and thus the greatest of Bhaal's avatars, is actually the Ravager, which is basically like a Slayer on steroids. You have to fight it in order to get to the Throne of Blood by dissolving the cocoon. Now, that brings us to the very last part of this, and that is simply to fight a Melisson the Black-Hearted. This, compared to every other fight in the game, is a very ambitious thing, because this fight actually has, mechanics and not just spell stuff going on in the background. A Melisson herself is really just a straight fighter. She likes to hit things physically, and she'll summon things in. So you'll have to have a way to deal with her summons and then also fight her properly. Once she reaches a certain point of her health, she'll jump back into the big pillar of light, which is supposed to be the essence of all the Bhaalspawn, and start absorbing more of it. Once this happens, she'll connect one of the platforms that are floating around nearby, and in order to prevent this, or kind of interrupt this, we need to go to the pool of essence on the platform that it's currently connected to, and fight the enemies there that she summoned in, and then turn off that pool of essence. We need to do this 3 times until all of the pools are gone, and then we need to finish off a Melisson. Once all of this is done and she reaches a certain point, the Solar will actually intervene and basically force Melisson, or a Melisson, to surrender, because she is technically immortal because she's so amped up on divine energy. However, as the Solar actually says, that this energy is stolen, and that while it makes her immortal and gives her great power, she's never going to be able to use it to ascend to godhood, because the gods have decreed that this competition is over, and that you won. The Solar explains that basically something has to be done with all of the Bhaalspawn essence now that all of the Bhaalspawn are effectively dead. If Imoen is with you, she will give up her Bhaalspawn essence just willingly, which the Solar manages to take without killing her, and then that leaves literally only you. You essentially have 2 options, as the Solar explains it. You can give up your essence, which will then be transferred into a Melisson, where the gods will then thoroughly and completely destroy her very soul, and then hide away Bhaal's essence in Mount Celestia, which is like D&D heaven. The other option is to take all of the essence to yourself and ascend to divinity as the Lord of Murder. Regardless of what you choose, the ending cinematic plays out. The cinematic itself is actually the same, however, the words do change, and then after that you'll be given a wrap-up of whatever companions you had with you. Now, before we wrap this up, I do want to mention one thing, and I'm not going to go into it in this video because we're just concerned about what the game was showing us. If you're curious, there is technically a canon ending to this saga, because in 5th edition D&D, Bhaal, the Lord of Murder, is very much so an active god again. Through external sources outside of the video games, they did actually give a sort of canon ending to this. Personally, not a fan of it, but it does exist. However, I do want to also mention that Wizards of the Coast is on record to saying that the canon of the video games and the canon of the actual D&D, tabletop adventures, so to speak, are, as far as they are concerned, separate canon. Even with there technically being a canon ending, that might not necessarily be the set-in-stone thing you think it is, simply because of that statement that they've previously put out. But with that out of the way, guys, that is it. That is our series on the story of Baldur's Gate 2. I truly, truly hope you enjoyed it. It was a blast to make, and hopefully this will get some people up to speed before Baldur's Gate 3 launches, or just give them the information they're looking for about this older game. So with all that out of the way, truly, thank you guys so much for watching. May you wander in wisdom, and have an amazing day.
Terrible name. Your tyranny shall be renowned, your strength and guile legendary. You are the Bhaalspawn, lord of murder, and the mark you have carved upon the realms shall never fade.